Welcome to Missing the Mark, where we look for meaning in strange places. I'm Christopher. Today I'm going to talk about the magic of editing and how it affects perception. And the starting point actually is a curious thing that's happened on my channel from time to time is I've had people who've asked me or accused me in some cases, actually more the latter, of having a script during my unscripted videos. And, occasionally, I'll look over, I tend to look over that way because that's where my bookshelves are. And so when I mention a particular book, I just sort of instinctively, look at it. Because I would do that in conversation. And similarly, I will sometimes, look down. Usually that's some sort of, consideration. I'll make some sort of point, and then I'll look down for one moment, and then I'll come back and continue. And these are sort of the instinctual things I do because this feels a bit like a conversation. And I've had people ask me, do you have a script? Are you looking at the script at that point? And no. This has all primarily been funny to me because everyone agrees, including people who will criticize my videos tremendously, that my scripted videos are much better than my unscripted videos. And of course they are, because it's just tremendously more work that goes into it. One of the nice things about scripting is that you have the time to say, no, that's really not the best thing here. Let me move it. Let me rearrange it. All the obvious reasons a scripted videos could be much better than an unscripted video. And so I just primarily found this funny that people would accuse me of something that I would, at this point, basically brag about if I was actually doing it. For a while early on, on my channel, when I would do these unscripted videos that were meant to be able to address subjects when I didn't have time to do a proper scripted video, I would at least, I'd think it out a little bit. I would type up an outline of what I wanted to talk about, then I'd print it out in fairly large type, and I would tape it under the camera, because I could easily see it there, and it's not real distracting to anything, and it looks fairly natural, and so on, for me to check on it. So, the amount my eyes would have to vary would be like that. I wouldn't, put a script down here to have to check. It'd take forever even to find your place. I haven't done an outline of major points to hit in order to hit them in probably a year at least. I've just been so far behind and had so little time that this is the best I can do, and it's better than nothing, so here I am. And so given all of that, the people who would accuse me of having a script and pretending to not have a script just made me laugh, because I think 10 or 12 videos ago, I actually at least had an outline or something, and I think I mentioned it, at least I've got an outline this time. It's a little bit better. And I got to thinking about this, because it was just a big joke to me. It's strange to be accused of having done something better. I eventually was thinking about it, and talking to some friends, and I finally sort of realized, it was pointed out, because a lot of people, the way they do YouTube videos is that they will have a lot of cuts in between, or they have a script with a teleprompter, or they have a script that they read and memorize and perform, or something along those lines. And any one of those things, whether it's the editing or so on, I'm going to be getting to the editing, don't worry. We are actually leading there. It basically bridges the gap, between especially editing and so on, or having a script that is performed. It enables you to have all of those properties of having considered the thing and rearranged the thing, and really sort of worked it out ahead of time to really think of it. And so it makes the thing better, obviously. But the other thing is, it's often presented in an attempt to be like a natural, continuous sort of talking. Now, I've always been kind of reasonably quick on my feet. I mean, I actually found, when I would do presentations, in school and in grad school and so on, less so in grad school, more earlier, but I almost can't work from a script anyway. I mean, if I wrote out a script, I would just want to get off of it too much. Just reading a script wouldn't feel right. So at most I ever produced was an outline, to keep myself sort of on track and make sure I hit all the points. I'm just naturally an extemporaneous speaker. And for better and for worse, it's got pluses and minuses. But in any event, it does. And a friend of mine pointed out that that a lot of atheists do really badly. They sound really clever in their main videos, and then have very little to say when it becomes unscripted, like in conversations. And they don't tend to have, the clever rebuttals. They don't tend to have major points. They don't tend to think of things. Now, this is entirely secondhand. I watched approximately no unscripted atheist conversations. A few things like a while ago with people who are atheists but weren't really talking about atheism proper. Like a conversation with Sargon of Akkad and a few other people, like more than a year ago or something. And that not really watching it for the sake of watching it, just for some other reason. So when you get to this sort of thing, that that they don't do well, there becomes this big difference in perception. And so for a bunch of them, they apparently try to stay away from doing any sort of live stuff because it becomes, like what was it, Godless Engineer versus Dave the Distributist. By reputation, I didn't see it, but by reputation, the guy was sort of grinding to a fine powder and then played the ukulele to console himself when he was done. So badly did he do when he had to think on his feet. And this is at odds with that presentation of being quick-witted in the edited version. And I finally came to understand that sort of what I was being accused of was pretending to be able to think on my feet. Like literally I'm standing at the moment, but, metaphorically, to think on my feet. And so faking that and trying to, I guess, seem smarter than I am or something along those lines. I'm not perfectly sure. The basic point being, though, that I was trying to pretend to skills that I don't have. And this is just me going. About the one big thing is I won't do this if I'm really, really tired, because then I ramble too much. But other than that, this is just me. And the thing is, everyone's normal to themselves. So this is kind of normal to me. It doesn't really feel any different. Like one of my favorite YouTubers, Lloyd, who goes by the name Lindy Beige. He's got a very fun channel. I really enjoy it. And he does his videos in one take as well. And so, I do my videos in one take because that means that there's no editing and no additional work, so I can actually get it done. I'm not sure exactly why he likes to do them in one take. He's never stated why that I can recall. Some people are impressed by this, but it seems quite normal and natural. He makes it seem very normal and natural. It's quite enjoyable. But, like I saw the Metatron, who also speaks on the same sort of topic of historical weapons and armor and culture and so on. He also does a lot of Japanese stuff, not just more European, where Lloyd tends to focus on in terms of area of expertise. But he once, remarking on the Metatron's videos and how impressed he was, mentioned he was impressed that Lloyd could do things in one take, whereas the Metatron tends to break things, cut things up almost like every sentence or two. And he was mentioning just how impressed he was by that. But the thing about it is, as much as it is impressive if you stop to think about it, I don't really get a very different sense of the Metatron's videos. He does a decent job cutting so that the cuts seem natural and giving the proper pauses. If you're not used to ever editing, if you need to edit it, people tend to run somewhat continuously. They tend to talk such that the tones of their voice, for example, carry through from one word to the next. Pardon, got a cough. And so it's actually really hard to edit well, and as somebody who's recording for this, you have to be good about actually stopping. And so this way, at the end of each sentence, you have a pause wherein you can actually cut the audio up, cut the video up on the audio boundaries. See, it's not all that natural to do that sort of thing. It's really easy, much more natural to say, like, stop on boundaries, then you just keep on going on to the next sentence, and there you are. So, it's still a skill in its own right. It's a different sort of skill. And then I got to thinking of a very popular sort of thing that you see around the atheistosphere. I don't know what you want to call it. Atheist response videos. And the response video, or sort of more the criticism video, where you'll find somebody who takes somebody else's video and then cuts it apart, and then will play a clip from it and then respond to it. And one of the things, if you look at it, what's kind of interesting, they're not the first ones to come up with this, at least not so far as I know. Certainly not that I've seen. I know it's been popular for making fun of music videos for a really long time. And other things, too, where it's just sort of a natural-ish sort of way of doing things. I probably, if I spent a while could think of examples on television where like a late night host would like play a clip and then respond to it. And the thing about that, what's really kind of interesting, is that it has the effect of seeming as if it's a reaction in the moment. It's generally presented as a reaction in the moment. Occasionally, like Todd in the Shadows in his music reviews, I don't know if he's still doing them or even has for years, but a while ago I used to like them. He very much had that style where he would make it would be sort of portrayed as if he didn't know what was coming next in the song, that he was responding in the moment. And so it would set up for jokes of thwarted expectations, where he'd say like, okay, I can see where we're going, we're going to do this. And then something very different, like, what? How did you go there? Sort of things. And you get a similar sort of thing in these atheist videos that have as one of their purposes entertainment. And in terms of entertainment value, this sort of approach, where you act like you don't know what's coming next, that you're reacting in the moment, even though you've watched the thing 14 times and have scripted the thing out carefully, it's kind of necessary for this kind of joke, and that kind of joke is a lot of fun. It does, however, also, and I think most of the time very unintentionally, convey the idea that this is really how a person, how quick-witted the person is. I'm told that there's a phrase in French that refers to it's something like words on the steps or something like that, but it refers to when you suddenly think of what would have been a really great thing to say in a conversation that was over a while ago. And so it has the effect of showing that you can come up with those things in the moment all the time, that you always have those ideal responses right at the time. And so it does have the effect of showing you to be much more impressive than you are. And again, just to be clear, I think in those atheist videos that they're not doing this to seem smart. They're not doing this to seem quick-witted or quick on their feet or what have you. I think that they are doing this because it's funny, that this is a well-recognized pattern, and it sets up for all sorts of enjoyable jokes. They're doing it for this reason, but it has that effect of making them seem smarter than they are. And here's where we get to editing. Because if you really want to see the people who seem vastly more talented than they are, and no knock against them, mind you, just vastly more talented than a human being generally can be, what you really want to look at is movies. And it's very interesting. Like, if you do a little bit of research into how movies are made, and I did just for sheer interest into the thing, it's really kind of fascinating how there's this great line, and I can't remember who said it, possibly William Goldman. I've read several of his books on screenwriting, but it was that your first day on a movie set is the most exciting day of your life, and your second day on a movie set is the most boring day of your life. Because movie sets are, well, they're boring. Like, the first day, it's amazing. You're getting to see, sort of behind the curtain and find out what's there and how is this magical thing called a movie actually put together. And you're seeing all this stuff for real, things you've only seen glimpses of. And it's just an amazing experience. And then the second day, well, you already know it, and now it's just work. You just have to do it. And the thing about it is every single scene is filmed on a decent budget movie. Shoestring budget movies are different, but on a decent budget movie, every scene will be filmed 10, 20 times, sometimes 30 or 40 times. I mean, literally, like, the same take where the person, I don't really think so. They might do that like 30 or 40 times to get just the right tilt of the head, just the right intonation, just the right sort of everything. And for every single scene in the movie, when you have continuous lines, you might see that 20, 30 times. And so the actual process of filming the movie is, and cut. All right, everyone, get into your places, redo the lighting, make sure everyone's hair is right, continuity person, make sure that all the coffee cups are in the right place, and so on. All right, places, everyone's set, and action. And it's the same thing you just saw. And it's like several minutes of setup. And the actor has to go and get themselves into the original frame of mind and run through it over again and run through it over again. And they're often, interestingly as well, very uninteresting to see because it's you don't even have both actors. Like if I'm in a movie and I sort of like, wait, what? There's probably the person I'm reacting to within the movie standing over there. There'll be the camera person, and then maybe there'll be somebody who feeds off a line, the previous line, but it's almost never going to be the actor whose line it is. That actor's probably, may well not be on set or, will be sitting off to the side or what have you. It's probably some, stagehand who just reads off the line beforehand, like, turns out he has the scepter. Wait, what? And you're just dealing with a stagehand, not the actual person that you're reacting to. Part of what actually makes the job of acting so difficult is that you have to put all of this imagination into it while you see where you're not all around you. It's why acting looks so much easier when you're looking at a movie, because you're looking at the entire fake world that's up there. And so you can imagine reacting to this entire fake world with all of its CGI and all the people in the places they're supposed to be and so on. Whereas in reality, there's tons and tons of stuff all around, just outside the field of view of the camera, that is totally the real modern world and not whatever you're pretending. The people reading the lines prior to yours aren't even the voices that you're going to be hearing. They're often done, from what I've read, in a very sort of flat, disaffected way. The stagehand doesn't say like, but I saw him with the scepter. But I saw him with the scepter. Because, that's the 14th time they've done it, and it's not that interesting. And so, you take this stuff, and you take 20 takes on average, I think. It depends on the director, too. Some directors really love enormous numbers of takes. And the thing is, there'll be subtle variations, there will be large variations. They'll say okay, now be really surprised for the next, 4 takes. Now make it mild surprise for the next 5 takes. And so they and some directors are really known for this, of doing 40 or 50 takes with every possible variation, and they sort of get criticized for being, well, that's not really directing, you're just doing every possible variation, covering your butt instead of having an artistic vision and committing to something, which takes a tremendous amount of time for everyone else. But the point being, and that really kind of goes to show the magic of editing, you take 40 takes of each scene, of each time they're any particular shot on the camera, and for a movie this is enormous amounts of filming, truly enormous amounts of filming. So you take all of that, and then you get to the editing stage, and then you can look through and you can find which takes happen to work together the best. The two people in these 2 takes, the take of the person saying, but I saw him with the scepter, and the person going, what? They may not have been even given the same directions. They're the same idea in mind. It's just when you see these 2 things next to each other, they actually work out really well. They may well not have been on the same set, on the same day filming these things. And they probably will be, because you tend to have sets for a short amount of time and want to get your monies out of the set before you strike it. But they may well not have been there at the same time. They may well have been there hours apart from each other when they did these things. And it could be that the second take from one person and the 23rd take from the other person just happened to go really well together. And it's not like anybody had beforehand planned or had the artistic vision of how these things melded together. It was, you had a basic, the script almost as an outline, at least when it comes to all of the nonverbal things the actors put into it. And so by just having all of these different options, you then, in editing, from a skilled editor, and editing is an amazing skill, the ability to edit well is really quite impressive. It's a complex skill. It's a very complex skill. To be basic editing is really, really easy on computers these days, but skilled editing is really impressive, because it involves so much of an idea of being able to imagine things together and then sort of take the raw materials and shape them that way with genius amounts of timing and changing the sounds and so on. The things that a skilled editor can achieve are really quite impressive. And so what you get in a movie is you get this spectacular thing where it looks like you have these people who just have these amazing reactions to each other that just dead on nail things all the time, and they don't in reality. They don't come close in reality. And so one of the really interesting things about looking at something like a movie is the sheer number of people whose work goes into producing the raw materials for editing, where the editor then takes not precisely the best of all of it, but all of the things that work together the best. And, often the best, sometimes not the best on its own, but the best in context with other things that weren't even happening around it. It has the ability to take, happy accidents, as Bob Ross would say, and do really amazing things with them and really make them look amazing. And so this becomes part of our general environment, the German sense of Welt, world. The environment in which we live and the things of which we are aware, that the degree to which people can seem awesome is reflected in this sort of thing where these become coherent people. All of these incredibly disjoint moments become edited together in a really coherent sort of way that is spectacular. And it's very enjoyable. It's a completely legitimate art. Don't get me wrong about that part. But it does inform us in terms of how great can a person be? How amazing is it possible for a person to be? And because in general we don't know, and even when you do know, it's hard to remember it, just how many takes will have gone into everything and just how much of a thing existed in the editing room afterwards. We have trouble calibrating. And in two ways. One, we can become something of addicts to this sort of level of excellence and have a harder time enjoying ordinary things. Although I think by and large, people tend to separate these things so much that at least for most people, it doesn't ruin, or the ordinary life of just, playing games with friends and so on. Having ordinary conversations with friends. But the bigger thing is that it's very deceptive about what real life is like and about what people are like. And it gets especially dangerous when you have things that are at least putatively based on real events. And this is where I think you get a kind of interesting conflict, because you have all of the movie magic going into making a person look like they're that sort of amazing, but of a real person. And I think this has a very strong ability to color how we think of things like the past when you see historical fiction, of specific people, and to color how we see events, because you'll get this sort of amazing person who seems to be this pivot of history. And it gives a fairly false view, because nobody manages to be that great in real life. I mean, that quick-witted, that fast, that nailing everything all the time of movies. And so it's an interesting thing to think about what editing does and what effect editing has on what we perceive. Bring it back sort of to where I started. It's a very curious thing that you can take a person who doesn't have very good arguments, take a person who doesn't even have very clever things to say, but through the magic, if they're halfway decent at editing, they can make it seem a lot better by having their timing be really good. And so, in that sort of classic response video, they can make things, by selecting their tones and by, possibly having several takes with different tones and finding the right one. By varying the tone, they can make what they're doing seem much more on point, seem much more relevant than it really is. And so it's kind of a curious thing to look at. There's nothing illegitimate about editing, as I've said. The only reason I don't edit these videos is I don't have the time. It just takes enormous amounts of time. Occasionally I make scripted videos where I edit them, and then, my typical format is I edit the audio, because I still, even then, don't have time to edit video. And the other thing is I like to get, pictures and take pictures of things and use those for sort of illustrative purposes. Occasionally even as sort of visual punchlines. And, well, frankly, I also think those are more interesting than just a video of me talking. But anyway, I do edited videos from time to time, not so much lately, but that's purely a lack of time, not because there's anything wrong with them. And so I'm not knocking edited videos, but I do think it is important to be aware of what effect editing has. We're calibrated. Naturally we calibrate to certain things, like the way real life just kind of keeps on going and doesn't stop, and you don't get do-overs and so on. You can say like, hey, can I rephrase that? That's fine, but like you don't get to go back and edit out the original of what you said. And so I think that's a good skill to have in the modern world, where increasingly using video, using editing generally, we get the ability to have do-overs and the ability to adjust things, sort of going back and almost in a sort of metaphorical sense, violating causality. And to be aware of these things, so, not because they're intrinsically bad or anything, but just so that we can calibrate appropriately, to get a real sense of, what's actually going on. And so much of the trickery that goes on in the world is entirely unintentional, is entirely accidental. Things that you do give people impressions, and you have no idea. They give only specific people impressions very frequently. That's one of the big things. Like, what does something in the background influence on somebody? Well, it's going to vary with the person. They're going to be different people, and people will have reactions you never thought of. You'll have some goal in mind, and then achieve all sorts of other things unrelated to your goal. So all of the, for these reasons, it's not that trickery is intentional. It's not, trickery proper in a technical sense, because the goal is not to deceive. But there's a lot of deception that goes on entirely accidentally, entirely innocently and unaware. But nonetheless, it goes on. And so in the modern world, which has all of these things like editing, all of these things that are changing stuff from how it normally would happen, but making it look like it wasn't changed, or minimizing the amount that it looks like it was changed. It's good to be aware of that, and good to be able to not see through it, but just to know what's going on so that we can sort of correct in sort of an analogous way to how, when you get to know people, some people state their opinions very forcefully about absolutely everything. And if they tell you in imperious tones that strawberry ice cream is better than vanilla ice cream, you kind of adjust and realize they're just stating a preference. They're not actually making imperious dictatorial statements. And similarly, there are people who understate everything, where they'll say they do have sort of a mild preference for, not getting badly sunburned today. And you kind of understand, like, okay, they always put everything simply, like they really care about this. You adjust to people as you get to know them. And I think in the same way, and people will eventually, but it requires, I think, a little bit more of a conscious effort for things like YouTube videos to adjust to what's actually going on in them, and to just be aware of it so that it doesn't accidentally fool you. That's all for today. Until next time, may you hit everything you aim at.